Jeannie Nyer, and I am a substitute for Dave Bench, whose father passed away this past weekend, and he asked me to chair this commission in his place. I think he thinks that it'll be easy for me because I was on the city council for 7 years. However, it is not a comfortable role, so please interrupt me at any time. But I guess we will start with the meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the city of Rollingwood is now called to order on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, and we'll start with a roll call.
Michael Hall.
Jeannie Nyer.
Tony Stein, I'm sorry to hear that, Dave, by the way. I see you're on.
Yeah, Jerry Fleming, condolences.
And Dave Bench.
Great. And I understand that Brian Nash will be joining us via Zoom, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. So we can expect to have one more commissioner. And then I think we should go ahead and acknowledge the fact that Michael Rhodes has resigned.
Can you pause for 1 moment? Because something happened with this. It's the withholding thing that says there's nothing to displace. Thank you, Jeannie.
We can proceed?
You can proceed.
All right. Well, the first item on the agenda is public comments. Are there any citizens wishing to address the Planning and Zoning Commission for items not on the agenda?
I don't have any public comments.
Okay. All right. So I guess our next item is the presentation by Alter Studio. So, Sam, take it away. For those of you listening, we seem to be having a few little technical issues.
Recording in progress.
Okay, and you can share your screen.
Okay. Awesome. Sam Alamo from Alter Studio. So we're gonna go over this presentation once more, and with the updated inclusions that were requested, including a person of scale, a home on each of the properties, and some dimensions. The home having a flat roof and a sloped roof. We can look at both those options, and just some dimensions that maybe can help clarify for any questions. And a quick question in terms of going over this presentation. Do you want the full thing again, or would you like just the recap? We've gone over it a few times, so I just don't want to repeat if everyone's kind of interested in only a certain portion.
Feels like we could dive into the specific properties, I think is what this one's for, yeah.
Right, I think we've all heard both of them. I mean, your presentation twice already, so
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so this is, sorry, I got something here in the way. This is the 4902 Timberline, which is the property that the home was designed for. So it actually sits, on the site in a way that makes a little bit more sense than the other properties, just because the topography matches the design. But you can see in the parallel planes model, it sits right in the envelope. And then if I just move on over to any of these other models, they're all fairly similar depending on where you choose to draw your maximum height limit. But just for the purpose of this site, you can kind of see that the house fits within almost every one of these tents. But it's definitely nice to see a home that somebody can understand and a human that stands within the boundaries of these tents. And I have a bunch of dimensions on here. You know, we don't have to go over all of them, but you can see, obviously, when you throw dimensions on the parallel planes, for example, your top dimension at any given point will be, 35 feet once you've terraced up from the 25-foot side yards. But once you get into these options over here, you can kind of see that, depending on where the portion, the tented portions start and stop, and depending on where you set your top plane, you're always going to get variation, and that'll vary, from site to site, and more drastically on sites with very sloping topography. But you can see here, there's portions of this property, of this one that we're looking at, that has 46'6" max height, just based on the topography and where that top plane was chosen. And then on some of these other ones, you might get areas that are just above 25 feet, 27'8" at the front, which is, a little bit more constricting. But I think like we've mentioned before in some of the other discussions, is depending on where you pick that top plane, that's what becomes a limiting factor, or, the ability, like the one on the right, you can see 23'10" here. And then this one on the left, you get that 46'6". So, you get varying heights that are either much shorter or much taller than the intended maximum height that you might get from like a parallel planes, or one of these other approaches that's maybe thought through a little bit to try to terrace the top plane along with each portion of tenting, to try to kind of limit the maximum heights available. So that's this site, which I think is.
So these are all the same site, and every one of those is a different tenting methodology?
Yeah, those if you look over here, we've started tenting from either the setback, or that last row is from the property line. And then all of these were just different variations that we kind of just quickly explored to see what that top would look like. But I think that's something that would have to get chosen and developed further, like where you choose that top from. But yeah, this is all the 4902. So I'll quickly flip to the other lots so we can see that house on that.
Well, I wanted to see on the other one, we didn't say which one was the, kind of as written language from the CRCRC.
I think are you talking about what exists now as a tent?
No.
Or-
What's in the proposed language that the CRCRC put together, the parallel plane plus tenting at 35 feet?
I think is this what you're referring to? So this is kind of the combination of the 40-foot sections of tenting, but then capping it with the parallel plane. So that option, and whether you take it from the setback or the property line, is very similar to what you would get with this one. So all three.
Sorry, and which one is this?
This is the parallel planes where you start at 25 feet on
This is CRCRC. Okay.
Yeah, he may not know what CRC.
Yeah, I don't know how else to describe
The
it.
first one is the parallel plane.
Yes, sorry.
And okay, so I wanted to just look at the tenting there. So this is with tenting starting at the setback.
Yep, and that starts at 25 feet, and then for every foot in, it goes up a foot. So you're just kind of offsetting the topography till you get to 35 feet.
Okay, and that the side of the house is not, or the side of the top roof line is not breaching the parallel plane?
You can see it kind of is, but that depends on where you put the site. The house, if you scoot this house over 2 feet to the right, you'll be in. So depending on where you set that site.
But I don't know if you can scoot it over to the right because you might go over the other setback.
Yeah, it depends on if you can't clear, like if an eave cannot clear the setback, like in Austin, you get like 2 feet. So we're used to kind of putting the edge of the building on the setback, and then you get like 2 feet of overhang. But if that's not allowed, then yeah, you know, you could move it over maybe 6 inches. But this,
And we're only talking the second level. Needs to be moved over.
and really, it's just like that awning there, you know.
And what is the setback on the left side? Is that the 10-foot setback or is it the 15-foot setback?
I believe it's 10 feet on both sides.
No, it's 10 on the right, it should be 15. 10 on the left. 10 on the left, 10 on the right.
I'm sorry, it's
Don't,
15 on the left and 10 on the right?
10 on, I misspoke, 10 on the left, 15 on the right.
Okay.
Is there any reason you couldn't shift to like 12.5-foot setbacks on either side, or 10 foot on the right and 15 on the left?
Alex, would you step or turn that microphone so we can hear that? You could just kind of step up to it.
I just was saying, is there a reason you couldn't possibly shift the house 2 feet over so that you had, or 2.5 feet, so you had the 12.5 and the 12.5-foot setbacks? Or
Oh, I
the
don't
10
know.
foot on the
I'm
right,
not
or-
building it anyway, so it doesn't matter, but I mean, I think ordinarily people try to, you know, leave as much yard as you can on one side as opposed to, you know, leaving 2 larger setbacks, but could you kind of go down where you're looking at it straight on, sort of like street level?
So you still have quite a bit of room
Yeah,
height-wise.
are you able to do the dimension, like, because one thing I'm thinking, obviously, this is a fairly, you know, it's not a steeply pitched roof, and I know there's been concerns expressed about people that want traditional, that's got a big pitch. I'm just curious how much space is left there.
Yeah, this is a 3 to 12 pitched roof, but I mean, you get quite a bit of you can get quite a bit of rise on there, and still, still be within the bounds. Obviously, depending on your side condition, but that looks, that's a little bit more, I think, what traditional steep roof folks might consider. But
Yeah, I'm just picturing like the house that you're working on right now, where it's got I'm sure they just like the look. It's got a very pitched roof. I know that on ours here, we did not have a particularly high ceiling on the first floor, which a lot of people, like, I think some people probably would have looked at our design and said, gosh, your ceilings are low on the first floor, you know?
that house currently works with the existing restrictions.
Yeah, it's flat.
No, he's saying the house you just mentioned that he's
Yeah.
designing fits within the parallel plane.
Yeah,
The steep pitch.
yeah. I got it.
Thank you, Tony, for
Mhm.
allowing them to use your
Yeah.
plans.
I think it's good to visualize.
Looks
So I
like
think what
it'd
we
be a
have,
nice house.
it would have been. So I think we have, you would not be able to, because I wish I'd have been able to be at the joint meeting, but I think somebody had mentioned it's 3 stories, which it's not. It's only 2 stories in any given volume. But I guess what we're saying here, you wouldn't really be able to do a 3-story on there, a 3rd story on there, which I'm fine with. I don't.
well, I guess if
If you're like 3
you guys
stories.
don't have any limitations on basements, so you could have a 3-story, just maybe not fully
3
above.
levels, not 3 stacked stories, yeah.
But I think you could still go up on this lower one, because you could excavate.
On the lower one, you could, yeah. Well, we actually didn't excavate because it's so sloped, but I guess you dig into some of the hill.
Well, in the current rules, you couldn't go higher than 35 feet at the top anyway. I mean, there's nothing any different at the front of that house with our current rules than parallel plane. And you would end up with the same.
Well, you take what, the lowest point and go 45 feet up from there currently?
Well, you still can't go higher than 35 feet from your highest point, which would be the front, under our current rules.
So you go 35 feet up from that highest corner and flat across. So you could have, then that's where we get into people having issues, is then the rear neighbor would have, if you were maximizing it, you go up with that bottom section to whatever it is, 40-something feet. And it'd be looming over the rear neighbor.
I mean, if you wanted to get 3 stack levels, you could do a dormer and, I mean, I hate to use the term attic, but it would almost be an attic, right?
Mhm.
But it'd be.
I don't particularly like 3-story houses myself anyway.
I also want to clarify, because I don't think you understood what I was saying. You could take that whole house and push it over 2 feet, and your setbacks would still apply, because it's a combined 25 feet. So you don't have to amend the house, you could just push it over.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just saying, I think it's most people, you then want, I mean,
You
for
have-
practical purposes, your side yards are dead. There's not a whole lot you can do with them, so I think you try to, I think that's why most people do 10 on one and 15 on the others, because it just maximizes one side of the yard. But agreed, you could do that. And now there's, with ours, there's obviously then the trees come into play, and that's, you're trying to work around the trees too.
So are we ready to go to the next scenario?
Sure. So this is 4715 Timberline. So the front, you know, it's a sloping away from you. So with the parallel planes, you kind of get the similar, you know.
And we're at the rear of the house here?
Well, this is technically, you know, I just flipped to
Okay.
the house and
I
mirrored
got
it
you.
probably just to make it work with the
But we're on the
topography.
street.
You're on the
Yeah,
street
okay.
side. So you can see, you know, you can get a taller, you can kind of push the house towards the back and still get the same. You know, I'm not sure what if you guys have any specific tents you'd like to look at, but
Alex, 4715, is that the one that the people were planning to build on?
Xena, yeah, or something.
Where we were looking at some actual plans that they had?
so you can kind of see in one of these occasions you get almost 60 feet.
And what is this scenario here?
This is a tenting, and then this top was probably chosen from, you know, 35 feet from the tallest point, probably on this tent back here. So that gives you, you know, a really tall house on the, you know, the
Center.
lowest part of the property in the front. I think this is you know, when you have a one flat plane across the top, I think this is what you guys are running into now. You know, maybe not to this extent, but on the lowest part of this, on the site, you get, you know.
So this is the 40-foot segmenting,
Yep.
and then where's the 35 feet being
The
taken from
35
within
foot-
each segment?
In this particular one, it's taken from the tallest, from the one in the back, from the furthest one, so the tallest point.
Okay, I think Mike had contemplated you have a separate height for each segment, not pick the tallest one and go over.
Gotcha,
Yeah, so I
gotcha.
think that's not one that we
More
would
like
want.
these.
Yeah, I think it's, more along, I don't know if it's that one, but it's something more like that one to the right. So this is a pretty steeply sloping lot from upwards from front to back and side to side,
Yep.
basically.
And then Bettisum is, you know, Bettis, sorry, there's always a typo there. Bettis is a, you know, flat lot. So you can kind of see the scale of that house on that lot. And then the Rockway is a little bit less relevant for this, for the scale of this house and the dimensions. I just tossed it on there so you guys could see, but the design of the house would vary so drastically on this site that, but you can see the house, you know, you can see the heights relative to the property, but
So which model is this? This is just the parallel plane with,
parallel planes on Rockway.
Is this yours too?
and can you go down kind of flat to the ground again on that, with the parallel plane? Yeah, I think it's this one. So you still have a decent amount of height above, yeah. Few feet.
So with a flat roof, you could easily put three levels.
Yeah, and I don't really mind, you know, if we're restrictive on people's ability to do 3 stack stories. I don't think that usually winds up looking particularly good unless it's maybe dormers or something. I do have some concern about some of the houses that I've seen that are 2 stories that have steeply pitched roofs, but I mean, the one you're working on, if that works. And does that one work for height and for tinting? Have you been able to overlay the height and the tinting on that one to see if it?
I'm gonna tell you, I think, haven't, you know, didn't model it precisely, but
Yeah, part of my concern arises, somebody sent me, and they weren't comfortable sharing it, but a 2-story house that was designed, and the volumes all fit in there, but it's got really steep pitch roofs, and it kind of cuts off some of those. And I think it's a house that generally people wouldn't really find to be all that large or offensive, but obviously it's subjective.
The lower sections are steeper pitch roofs, and that main volume that's kind of the main bulk of that house got a little shallower pitch, so it fit in that current. I think it would be the same for parallel plat. So it's not a big sacrifice for us.
Just might mean you can't go as pitched on your top if you're on the top of the second story.
But what that was good, because it made the more pitched roofs more accurate as such.
And the house you just referenced that you said that it wouldn't work, how do you know that?
They had designed a house, and they had their architect overlay the parallel
So the
plane over it.
architect
An
looked at
architect did it, architect did it. They had a 3D model like this. And it wasn't, I mean, you could have redesigned the roof structure, you know, in a different style house. I mean, it wasn't like you couldn't build a meaningful house there. It just was going to influence what design you were able to do. And that's only, I mean, you'd mentioned in, I think, our first meeting, a concept that you had seen that allowed for exception explicitly for pitch roof, where I was hoping I could go back and watch the meeting before I came in here, and I wasn't able to. But there was some sort of relief with just roof, specifically if you wanted to pitch. Like as an example, if you had this and somebody said, well, I really would love a steeply pitched roof in the middle for whatever design reason. And, you know, if it's in the center and it's just the pitch of the roof, you know, so if you were, you know, saying it would otherwise be here and we're going up here, you know, it's probably not something somebody would find particularly offensive. It's in the center of the house, which we talked about at one of our meetings. And there was something you said as a concept that really resonated with me on that. But of course now I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's I might have been referencing the Austin code, which you know it's your top plate, so the structure above can penetrate that 45-degree tent. So you can,
Maybe that's what it was.
if you have a, yeah.
We had that provision in our language at one time that there, you know, once you got so far in, that there might be a tolerance of 3 or 4 feet that would be provided. I mean, that was something that we had at one time. So, I mean, that's not something that would be, I don't think that would be be a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you can obviously build it because that house, one of the reasons we didn't build it is because it got too big. So you can build a large house, obviously, with this within reason. I have a little bit of fear, and it started when we were looking at the 3D models with no houses in there, and you kind of look at it, and
Oh, yeah.
all of them are very flat, or they're all very flat. And I just looked at it. Part of what we're trying to solve for here is spec builders who try to maximize everything. And you know, one fear I have is that an unintended consequence of this is that you're going to get a lot more flat roof houses that are, you know, I think flat roof houses, what we were trying to do is, I personally think they look better when you don't have huge ceiling heights. You know, I think when you have these huge masses and then the flat, which we have on a lot of spec houses that are flat roof, I just worry that there's a little bit of an invitation to, well, flat roof, we're going to get more, let's max it out and we'll make sure we don't breach the tenting, but you know, let's get it all the way up to that 35 foot.
can do
things
that
I've
now,
learned about.
but they can do that now.
Yeah, well, we're changing what we have now for sure. Yeah.
Right, but, how many square feet is this house?
I think it wound up being close to 6,500.
Oh, it's a big
Yeah.
house. Oh, wow.
And it had a good, that, I don't know what you call it, partial subterranean, I guess, on the back, was a big part of that.
How
That was
wide
just,
is
that was
this
just sort of,
structure? How wide is it?
ours is one of those it was one of those timberline lots. I forget how,
No, but the house itself,
I don't know.
85 feet.
85?
Well, my goodness, 6,500 square foot
Mhm.
house.
Not every lot you can build that far across though. My concern is that for lots that are limited in the width, you can actually build buildable lot, maybe because of trees, things like that you wanna keep. What we're doing is we're changing how high potentially that house can build to fit the lot better. I know the goal is to not have a house looming over someone or whatever. My only concern with tenting is that for houses that may be designed better to be a smaller footprint and slightly higher, that we're gonna kind of take that out of the picture.
Yeah, I think, there's probably somewhere you'd be, kind of everybody would be better if you shove it to one corner or side or whatever of the lot and, maybe we're 3 stories on that portion and smaller elsewhere. It's just really hard to solve for all of them.
Right. But there's no exception for that either, so
Yeah.
that's the problem.
I remember at the last meeting, Alex, I think Brooke mentioned something, the one I watched, about, well, you can just excavate. But as I recall, there's only certain situations where you can excavate. In other words, you can't just go dig out a whole hole over the whole lot and then build a 40-foot structure that doesn't breach the, is that right? Wasn't there, I don't have the language.
Yes, there was.
There's something where if
There
you
was
can
a-
excavate on a certain portion under certain circumstances.
It's in the minutes.
Yeah. 10 feet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can excavate in the rear of the house. The idea is that you start with the native surface and you're allowed to achieve a greater height from the native surface by excavating below it. But you still maintain a plane that is parallel with the original native surface. And that plane can't be breached. So yes, it's true, you can go down and allow for up to 40 feet if you do excavation. And we provided an additional 5 feet of allowance if, in fact, at the back portion of the house, the roof was pitched. At least that's the way that it's written in the codified version of the ordinance right now. If you look at the codified version, you'll see kind of at the base of that, that's what it talks about.
Do you know what,
97 through 104.
97, okay.
And
Bu-
it- and
Building height may be increased below the parallel plane by way of excavation when starting a minimum of 20 feet horizontal from the side or rear property lines as follows. 1, as to the portion of the building above the excavated area, 40 feet above finished floor for uppermost surface of the eave or parapet. Or 2, as to the portion of the building above the excavated area, 45 feet above finished floor for ridge line of sloped roof with minimum of 3/12 roof pitch.
So I'm curious if your friend's project had any excavation at all, or if it was all above ground, and if it did, it might fit.
Yeah, I do not know that.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that comment before.
I said that maybe the project he was referencing that a friend had their architect look at might not have incorporated that rule. and
Uh-huh.
if it was just measured all above ground or if there was any excavation.
Okay, thanks, thank you.
Sam, do you have any other scenarios to discuss? I do
No.
appreciate the fact that you did put that little man on there.
Where is he? There he is. There he is.
You can see it.
How tall is it?
Let's see if he's actually 6 foot.
Here you go.
5'11".
The
Any other-
best part.
Any other questions for Sam?
I want to say that this work, hoped, the use of this house and putting it in the various scenarios here in the various lots just seemed to work really nicely as far as illustrating what the limitations that we're dealing with here are.
It sounds
I hope everybody is getting a good sense for this, how well this is working.
It seems to me that the parallel plane language that's codified in this proposed ordinance actually is pretty flexible. It's much more flexible than I had originally envisioned when I was first starting to study this, which has been quite a while now. Any other comments?
I was kind of interested in maybe asking Sam, I'm trying to pull it up here, about a couple of Mr. Rhodes' parting comments or suggestions to see if he had any thoughts or if they resonate or anything.
One of Mr. Rhodes' comments I didn't quite understand. But part of it was, one of them was that he was concerned that there would be tenting in the rear part of the house, and that would be overly restrictive.
I think Kevin expressed some strong support for that concept in the last meeting, I think is where that came from.
And could one of you all address that a little bit? Or one of the three of you?
I thought you had conversation with Kevin and
He dropped it.
relieved his thoughts because, you know, the tenting from the side setback goes all
Runs all the way
the way
back.
That's as much as we were concerned.
So there's already some amount of limitation from the rear. You're not gonna get something that's 35 feet over.
But it doesn't, but there's no additional restriction for tenting on the back. It's only on the side.
'Cause aren't you already 20 feet off the setback
True,
or off the property line?
right.
So, you know,
So it doesn't apply.
it's really the same height. You're 35 feet, 20 feet from any of the 3 setbacks.
Okay.
So I think that's what I remember you guys talking about, like there was no need for it because you're already as far back as you're restricting the side setbacks.
Okay.
That's correct.
Did you have any other concerns about that one, Tony?
No, I was more interested, I know, I mean, Mike had the most practical, experience of any of us with any of this stuff. And he always kept coming back to this native grade versus existing grade and the fact that there's no, lots in Rollingwood effectively that have not had a house there already. And I remember, Sam, when you were talking in the first meeting, you just kind of made some assumptions, right? You take the lot and, like this one has a house on it, and you make some assumptions on what you consider to be native grade. Do you anticipate, one thing that's been talked about before is people kind of gaming grade. And, do you anticipate any issues there? And like what he said is, there should be a process to establish native grade, or alternatively, it should be existing grade. Given that there's virtually no greenfield properties remaining in Rollingwood, native grade is often impossible to establish. Unless this can be established by the building official prior to a property owner designing a home, then it will be ripe for confusion and potential disagreement. A good example is the recently demolished home at 2406 Rolling Wood, which I think is the one that has some big flat areas from where the house was.
If I could address
Sure.
y'all. So we do have a portion in our code right now, and I don't know if this will clarify and kind of help things, but we do have, before a demolition of a house, you're required to get a native ground survey. And so therefore, we go out, ATS will go out and they survey the lot as is. So that creates your native ground.
So really, we're just using, I mean, it's obviously not native because there was a house there.
Right, but it's
So we're-
native before that new house gets built.
So
So,
maybe
I
that's
mean,
what he's
just,
talking about, the
So it's
existing.
really existing.
It's really
It's
just a poor
existing,
word, I guess,
but-
for it, right?
right,
I mean,
excuse me?
it's kind of just a poor word for it because it's not really native.
Right. I think it was
So
just
we almost
native
have a defined
before-
native?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it
We
would
do
be-
have a native defined actually, and it is exactly as Nikki is saying. It is the survey at the time that the building permit is being applied for.
The existing grade on a lot prior to development.
And is that in this proposed
Yeah, it is.
ordinance? Do you know where it is?
Line 65.
65.
And to be fair,
Original
this is-
native ground surface means the existing grade on a lot prior to development of the residential. It almost should say the new residential building.
Yeah.
As may be shown on a certified topographic survey of the property.
I just didn't know if y'all knew that
Yeah,
was in our
well,
code
that's-
that kind of,
Thank you
may
for
help y'all.
defining that. I think that one of the things we could consider doing when we vote on this is to add a recommendation that the city council examine the verbiage related to native ground versus existing grade before they finalize the ordinance. And so that would be our recommendation to the city council, that they examine that or redefine it a little bit more. At least, I mean, if we added that to the development of the new residential building. Whatever they want to do, but I think it might be something we could consider amending the proposal.
So like on 4902 as an example, when you virtually tear the house down and sort of establish your parallel plane. Okay, so this might be a good example of that.
Yeah, so you can see the flattening of the existing house, and so I think I mentioned it in the first one. You know, we had to we had to connect the dots essentially where the existing site was, and we tried to do that as naturally as possible with, you know, a flat property or, you know, a house being demolished on the site. But you know, maybe here this contour needs to, you know, go straight without having an outcropping here that looks like it was, you know, cut for the corner of the house. And I don't know who decides what the best interpretation of connecting the contours is in the most natural way possible. But
Well, that's really the nature of my question is
yeah,
how do we do that? And I wonder if it will create disputes. I don't know. I mean,
I just wanted to make the point that under our current rules, you're choosing one point, and it is also been torqued with by a previous home, as is the low point, and it could even have been retained. But there's nothing in our current code that controls for that. And to me, the beauty of parallel plane is that the site controls for it. You're not beholden to one point that may be an outlier, but the whole site itself constitutes what is the scale of this house going to be with respect to its neighbors, as opposed to just one point that could be a game changer in terms of how you manipulate the height, if that makes sense.
yeah, there's clearly a lot of flaws in our current one. I mean, I think I kind of agree with you and disagree with you in a way. I mean, well, I agree with you that overall, I think the one thing that's nice is that it's one point, whether, you know, there's a number of other different flaws with it that create things that are too big, but I think it's kind of nice that there's one point, you know, that's in the building structure. I mean, I guess you know, here again, if you, I don't know, I'm just picturing the one on Rollingwood Drive, that Mike referenced, and it's kind of a stair step right now after being torn down. I guess some of that can be fixed with excavation, so long as it's 20 feet inside, right? So you can take that and you would ordinarily, your parallel plane would be pretty odd. And so you'd still have the same parallel plane, but you would excavate some of those humps, basically.
Yeah, you're allowed to clean up. There's a provision that says you can kind of do what he said with those contours.
And so it'll just ultimately be a discussion between architect and building official to figure out if they think that's good.
Sam, would you comment on whether or not you actually do something similar to that in the city of Austin? Have some discussion with someone and, you know, at the beginning of the design process is about what's going to be permitted on that site?
Or Westlake Hills even, because it's parallel plane, right?
To be honest, I don't have any experience personally with, you know, dealing with an existing site with tons of variance where we had to, you know, demolish and kind of, you know, determine native grade like this. You know, I have a demo experience where it was just a flat lot. They cleared the house and that's it. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a good reference
Okay.
point for that.
Thank you.
Tony, did you have any other concerns about what Mike had written, Mike wrote?
You know, he comes back to tinting at the property line versus the, you know, where the grade's more likely to be original versus starting at the setback. I mean, I think on a lot of houses that won't be materially different. There's probably some that it will.
That would only really affect the segmenting approach. The parallel plane is established, you know, by the topography, and it doesn't matter whether it's at the setback or at the property line. It just doesn't matter.
No, it does, because the topography at the property line could be different than the topography at the setback line. I think that was the whole point of it, is the
Yeah,
implica-
but if you start at the property line, you're still following the contours as you go inward.
You are, but if there's, you know, I don't know, X grade of slope on the 10 feet to the edge of the property, in other words, if it's a lot that's sloping side to side downwards and you're on the bottom side of the slope, if the drop off, you know, in the last 10 feet of the lot is very dramatic, then you're going to wind up with a different outcome from those two applications. I'm not saying I have a strong feeling which one's better or worse,
Okay.
but it definitely could be different.
I'm just going to have to disagree, Tony. You know, straight up is straight up, regardless of where you are on the slope of the lot. It does matter in the segmenting approach. It doesn't. In my view, it does not matter at all in parallel plane.
Well, there's a tent, so the tent is gonna be affected.
Yeah, the tent is
Drawing a
affected.
tent,
Yeah,
So of course it will be affected.
yeah.
But
I'm
it's
not sure
only
I
by
followed
10
that.
feet. It's not, I mean,
Well, in
It's
some
like-
cases it would work. I mean, yeah, you would be better off. I mean, if your goal is to build taller on the side of the property, in some cases on a sloping property, you'd be better off starting at the 10-foot line, because if the lot's going
Right.
like this and the last 10 feet drops like that, you know, you're gonna be more restricted. Of course, if you're going up and the lot slopes up there, you know, you're gonna be
That's why we suggest
better
the
off.
setback.
that's why what?
That's why we suggest
Mhm.
the setback.
Right.
Yeah, I think I probably tend to agree with that, other than that you might have more past manipulation of the whatever used to be native grade at the, but I think I don't know, I think you probably have more situations where you might be worse off if you're starting at the property line, you know, less flexibility, I guess. So you could kind of draw your plane and go have a conversation about that before you start designing a house, so you don't waste a bunch of money.
City of Westlake, that's, in the past, that's not been an issue.
Do we do that ever here, Nikki? Do people, I guess, maybe there's no reason to, or do people submit?
There are some times where people do ask for that, and it's just more so them going over what the current rules are, just making sure that they understand what the code is saying. It's not a very in-depth pre-development meeting, but I haven't come across anybody doing that before development. It's usually they have everything, they just wanna make sure that they have everything perfectly lined up, so.
But they could.
They could, yes, yes, absolutely.
Especially a new architect, right, who is
Yes.
not particularly knowledgeable about Rollingwood code.
Do we get many neighbors kind of coming in, when a property's being built to sort of challenge, this seems too high, I want to talk about that? I guess I'd ask y'all as the experts of, even if an architect goes and talks with a building official and says, here we have rock outcroppings, holes and knolls. And, here's my assumptions I'm making, I'm established this, and building official says that looks reasonable. Do we feel like there's much risk that now they've designed the whole house and are building and somebody comes in and, neighbor and says, well, a reasonable person, another reasonable person might not have made that assumption on the holes and knolls and would have done it differently? Do we get a lot of people that kind of come in after the fact trying to challenge stuff?
Not that example.
No.
I've had to survey one of my houses to satisfy a neighbor. That was back when it was 30 feet. I told the surveyor, if it starts with a 2, I'm happy.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Well, I guess we should thank Alter Studio for all their effort, and I also thank the Rollingwood City Council for appropriating the funds to make this visualization so much easier to understand the language of the proposed ordinance. I guess at this point, we can go ahead and go to the consent agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dave. All right, I'm sorry, did you have a question? No? Okay, Nikki. As the agenda states, all consent agenda items are considered to be routine by the Planning and Zoning Commission and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of the consent agenda items unless a board member has requested the item be discussed, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda. And essentially, for our consent agenda, we are asking for approval of the minutes of the March 5th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and the March 26th joint City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Okay,
Do
so,
we have any corrections or concerns or questions regarding the minutes? No? Do you have,
I move that we approve the consent agenda items.
do we
I
have a second? Jerry seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, let's go on to the regular agenda. Number 5, discussion and possible action on proposed amendments to the city's code of ordinances regarding residential building height in the residential zoning district. So at this point, we need a motion to approve the proposed code of ordinances so that it can be passed on to the Rollingwood City Council for their discussion and approval.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Do you think we could add that one recommendation to the city council that they look at the verbiage specifically regarding existing grade so that they might modify that? I would appreciate having that in the recommendation. Would
Go
that,
ahead.
do you approve of the,
Just have to make the amendment.
a friendly amendment? I make that friendly amendment.
Oh, I second.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, where are we in this language with the special exception? I mean, I think we've had the attorney tell us that they don't like that. Is that right?
I think that what they had suggested is that special exception isn't appropriate, and they'd rather that it be changed to variance, which may also make for a friendly amendment.
Yes.
I don't see an issue with that. I used to, but I don't anymore.
So tell me about that and why, Dave?
Well, I really couldn't come up with where the special exception, with the special exception, we need to have specific wording which applies to the special exception, so that it can be examined against so that a ruling can be examined against the special exception and whether it fits or it does not fit. I think a variance is going to give us a little more generality,
But you'll have to prove a hardship, right?
And I respect I respect the opinion of counsel on it. That's
Yeah.
But if it's a variance, you have to go prove all of the hardships associated with a variance through.
That's correct.
So would could you restate your friendly amendment, Dave, to, with respect to this special exception?
in the portion where the special exception is mentioned, I move that it be changed to a variance as per recommended by city council.
City council or city?
Excuse me, the legal people.
Is there a second to the second friendly amendment that Dave just proposed? I'll second it.
So just to be clear, is that just going to leave all the language the same, but change the word special exception to variance?
That's correct.
And at that point, I mean, once this is passed to the city council, they can discuss this and change it.
How is
as-
that different from now? You can get a variance right now on anything, right? I can go to city council and
That's
say,
what I
I
was
want
gonna
a
ask,
variance
but-
on this, so taking that away is extremely significant, I believe. And not defining special exception better is just lazy, instead of defining the special exception in a way that would work. Because if the flood zone and so forth was an issue, a variance is just gonna make it almost impossible to get it.
So you prefer the verbiage?
Variance is almost never approved.
You prefer special exception?
Well, I prefer a special exception that's defined correctly so that, yeah, it won't be an issue with legal.
So could we modify your friendly amendment, Dave, to state, rather than say, we want to substitute the term variance for special exception, instead, we would prefer that city council more clearly define what a special exception is?
What I would expect is that city council will kick it right back to planning and zoning and say, you define what the special exceptions are.
I can,
I was gonna ask one question, because the way it's written, it says, should a landowner believe it's a lot to be so severe, et cetera. Are we even allowed to have language like that and then say by variance? Like, does that somehow make it more possible to get a variance because we've said why you can seek the variance?
yeah, so, I can speak a little bit on to why Charlie made that comment about, it being a variance. Because the way it is written, it appears like it is a variance because that would be a typical hardship for a property. Any floodway, any topography issues, that's typically something that people would go and get a variance for. You wouldn't need to state it in the code if it was a variance because anyone can go ask for a variance if there is a true hardship and they meet the requirements of a variance. If you're going to pass it as a special exception, you'd want to add some things to it to explain like why they would need to meet the criteria for a special exception, because you would need something, or the zoning board of adjustments would need something to sort of evaluate the special exception. So we'd want to add some more language if that is the path that you wanted to consider. The way it was written, Charlie saw it as it was already sort of written as a variance because the conditions for the special exception as written is sort of the same requirements for a variance. That would be considered a hardship as topography and being within a flood zone.
All right.
So, and how does that work practically if, say there's nothing in here, somebody says, I've got this crazy slope, I want to go in and try to get a variance. I mean, there's no guidelines for the board to say, okay, we're going to give you 50 feet, or we're going to give you 40 feet, or we're going to allow you to put that parapet there or not there. I mean, do they just have carte blanche to do whatever they want?
Technically, no. For a variance, typically they're supposed to grant the variance with as little variance to the code that still meets the intent of the code. So say they need like 10 feet, okay, I'll start with something simple. I won't get into the height requirements, but say that there's a 10-foot setback, but there's weird topography on the other end, so they need to move into the other portion of the setback. They would just be able to do it like the small portion. Say there's a 5-foot like impediment of like topography on the other side. Typically, the ZBOA would get the recommendation from staff saying, well, they just need to move it 5 feet because there's 5-foot problem on the other side. That would still somewhat meet the intent of the code to sort of keep the setback the same. You really have to rely on staff to present the staff report and explain how the intent of the code is still being met. ZBOAs can sometimes grant things and not place conditions on it. It really just depends. So it's up to y'all to write the code so that they know what the intention of the code is. So if there's not language that says, and I believe there is, what the intent of this is for, I would recommend adding that.
So you're recommending that we remove the term special exception and substitute variance the way Dave made his original
so that we're not
proposal.
messing with it, I would say that would be the easiest path forward. If you want to make it easier for people to get to vary from the code, we can work on a special exception, but we would need to add some criteria to that, to what would qualify them to get this special exception beyond what is typical for a hardship, which is topography and flood zone. A variance is supposed to be difficult because you don't want people to vary from your code. And how it's written now, like I said, topography, flood zone, that is typical. Those are typically granted as variances. I don't know how y'all's ZBOA works, but that a training could be something that's a possibility. Or
I mean, one thing that I like about having language in here, even if it practically speaking isn't necessary because it's already something you get a variance for, is at least it speaks to the intent of the people that wrote the code, that, you know, we thought about this. And, you know, so then if the zoning board of approval says, well, I mean, they had a contemplated variance, you know, for a situation like this, when they put this new code into place, does that somehow give them a little bit more
Right.
ammo to be flexible. Maybe legally no, but,
Good point.
and I guess the concern I always have with the variance when you're talking about this for building a house is I don't see any way that you can go in and have a chance of getting approved unless you've fully designed a house and you say, here's the problem that I have, and this is what I've designed to try to work around that doesn't fit the code. And, what does it cost? A couple $100,000 probably to get to that point to design a house, and then they say no. I don't know. And again, we didn't have all the most sloped lots, but I know the people that came in a while ago that had super sloped lots on Timberline. I mean, do you have to kind of go? It'd be hard to go design a house kind of on spec, hoping you can get a variance. So I would love if we could have a special exception that we could write properly to have someone have, some level of assurance that if they design around this special exception, that it's got a greater probability of being approved than a basic variance. But
Well, remember, once an ordinance is passed, it can always be amended. And the city council can always, if a situation arises where a special exception would be more appropriate, they can always, at that point, ask P and Z to rewrite or to amend the ordinance. Duke, what would you like to say?
Well,
Mr. Garwood.
Yeah. Special exceptions might be hard to identify all those, but I mean, I have no fear of the variance process, and I'm speaking from experience. I would probably be considered the king of variances in the city of Rollingwood. But I mean, that's a really straightforward process. No architect should ever go spend a $200,000 or whatever to just get to that point. That should be discovered pretty early on, especially if you're looking at difficult topography or if you're looking at a difficult lot configuration. I mean,
so you're just going in with more basic massing conceptual stuff to get the variance as opposed to a fully designed house?
in that case, yes. Yeah.
And is that, is that enough legally for a variance to be approved?
If
I
it
guess
meets that-
then do they give you a new set of guidelines that you have to meet, or do you have to
If
come
it
back in
meets
again for?
those 7 criteria, and again, some of them are really easy to meet and a couple of them are really difficult. But if you express a hardship, you demonstrate it well, and again, I think the variance extent is incumbent upon the applicant to ask for something reasonable that says, hey, we want to design something that's totally appropriate and we need a little leeway because of the hardship of whatever it may be.
But you can just, procedurally speaking, you can kind of have more of a conceptual design, and they would say, we approve that, and obviously you go to design development, things change a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess you just can't change
I've
from there?
gone
You have
in
to
with
go
a
back?
site plan and gotten a variance and schematic elevations, and it was the very front end.
And then you're able to kind of just design within that
Yeah.
new exception you got. That's why I can't picture how they give you, what you walk away from that with. They say, we approve this that you presented to us? Like they
Correct.
don't- Or do they say, you get another 5 feet, or?
I've had it where we kind of asked for more than we thought we could get, and we negotiated somewhere in between. And I've had it where they said, hey, whatever's on that drawing, we approve it, go for it.
Yeah, and so one of the criteria that they have to review is the variance is the minimum variance necessary to alleviate the unnecessary hardship. So they should be only approving variances that are just the minimum needed to alleviate that hardship that they have. They shouldn't be going above that or beyond or allowing anything.
Probably some conditions where that's pretty easy to define. I
Mhm.
think something like what we're talking about is not as easy. But.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I don't think we ought to be scared of using the variance process as part of how we accomplish exceptions as such.
All right, well, have a motion to approve the proposed ordinance with 2 friendly amendments, one specifying or requesting that the city council examine the verbiage related to existing grade versus native grade. And the second friendly amendment was to substitute variance for the special exception language that's on line 90.
Right.
And all 3 of these proposals have been seconded, correct? Any further discussion?
Well, if we do that, we're gonna have variance where special exception is in section C. Then-
Section C, which is, that's line 70, right?
Line 90,
I mean 90. I'm sorry, I thought
but then we have on line 111, a whole definition of special exception.
No, that's drainage. That's,
That,
Well, it
that
says
special
special
exception, Tony, has to do with the, if you find yourself in a drainage easement, or if they change the floodplain definition, that's where that special exception comes in. It's a whole different thing.
So we're gonna leave that special exception?
yes.
Yeah, that special exception is well defined.
Okay.
And as I said earlier, if a situation arises where another definition of a special exception needs some work, city council can always request that P and Z look at that for that specific situation, like this one, like drainage. Any other concerns or questions? Well, all those in, I'm gonna ask for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
I haven't voted. Aye.
All right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 1 nay. Motion passes. Thank you. That's a lot of
Thank
hard
you.
work. Dave, thank you, thank Alex, thanks
Oh,
Duke,
yeah, yeah.
thanks Nikki, to everyone. This has
Right.
been a long road coming. And now it's the city council's responsibility to take it and do what they want to do with it. All right, the next agenda item is number 6, discussion and possible action on definitions and regulations of playhouses and playscapes. So Jerry, would you like to take the lead on this one?
Okay, I put in the additional agenda, new definitions for playhouse and playscape.
Yes.
Hopefully you saw.
No, they were not put in the packet.
Oh,
Yeah,
they were?
I saw.
Oh, I thought they were. I thought I saw them in there.
Did you? Did you put Jerry's stuff in?
Yeah, it was, I printed it off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The definition playhouse means a freestanding,
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
do you need it?
Yeah,
Here.
well, I have one. Okay. Playhouse means a freestanding structure with a roof supported by walls and is designed as a toy for children's activities. The enclosure of the walls or solid floor, if present, makes the area of the playhouse impervious cover. Playscape means a freestanding structure that is mostly unenclosed, has no solid floor, and is designed as a toy for children's activities. A children's playscape typically consists of a swing, slide, and climbing walls or ladder. Definition.
So, the, so essentially, we are, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. What are we doing? Are we amending what we have already approved, Nikki?
Well, they want to,
Oh, Ms. Megan?
yeah,
Yes. So, last time y'all came up with the definitions and all that, and then, after y'all's meeting, we had it put into code, to actual language and how that played out, and that is what y'all have on page 17.
Right.
And that code's written out. So with the definitions that y'all had approved at the last meeting, y'all had playhouse means a freestanding building that mostly enclosed and is exclusively for children, playscape, a freestanding structure that is mostly unenclosed. So legal had looked at those definitions that y'all had approved when they were placed in here, and he was saying that it needs to be more specific, because mostly enclosed and mostly unenclosed is kind of
Vague.
confusing. That's hard for staff to figure out what mostly enclosed or mostly unenclosed could be. Jerry did go in and kind of define those a little bit more. I put a few comments in the side just so that you guys could get an idea of some definitions that have been previously used with the Planning Association and such. So
Thank you. So those are in pink and green?
well, I didn't,
Yes. So essentially what we're doing is taking Jerry's proposed definition of playhouse and playscape and substituting the new definitions for what was approved in the original ordinance.
well, yeah, I'm going to get council's and Nikki's feedback.
So what we are asking is, what y'all had approved is the language that is in the code. And then the questions that were brought upon that staff is asking is just for clarification on those definitions. Y'all would vote on what y'all want those definitions to be. We would place them in the code, and then this would go forward to council for them to kind of look at, because that would be the first time that they're really looking at this code. And then we would still have to take it back to public hearing and such.
Okay. So I have a question for Jerry, I guess. You also have additional notes in addition to your definitions.
Oh, that's my crypt notes.
Oh, those are, oh, okay, so we're only looking at the
Yeah,
definition
yeah.
of playhouse and
I-
playscape.
I wanted you to, have it
Okay.
in front of you, what terms are important.
Okay, okay. All right, well, it's pretty,
So I guess-
self-explanatory, so,
Any comments?
yes, do we have any comments?
So
I'm wondering why you need to have that sentence that the enclosure of the walls or solid floor, if present, makes the area of the playhouse impervious cover. Is there a purpose for that statement?
Yes, I want to make it clear that it is, it is significant and to be considered part of our impervious cover, even though we may not have one. When you get to the, 200 square foot roof, you're required to do a drainage
Right.
plan.
But with what y'all are defining as a playhouse,
Right. And
down, you're putting it at only
I-
certain square feet.
Yeah, 120
So-
square feet.
I know, but there could be other structures elsewhere. I just want to make it clear that it needs to be considered in the totality of our taking up room in our required yards.
Here's my concern. If someone had already built their house, or that the house was already built and there was a drainage plan in place, and the all of the impervious cover was appropriately considered. And the drainage plan, accommodates all of that. Would that preclude them from putting a playhouse on their property because maybe they've maxed out their impervious cover requirement? That would be my concern. Would they, would this possibly keep somebody from actually having a playhouse?
Well, does anybody check that? If they even come in for a permit?
Well, then why are we including it?
Well, because I thought it was significant enough to tell you the difference between the two
What do you think?
toys. Okay? So, to me, it's significant when you want to protect the vegetation requirements, or not requirements, but desires or inclinations of required yards. As people build out to the building lines, the only thing left are these little 10 and 15 and 20-foot strips, except maybe in a corridor somewhere and in the front yard. So to that end, I'm looking at trying to preserve trees, grass, vegetation, light, sunshine, etc. And hence I emphasize that this blocks all that, sort of violates the requirement or the intent of having required yards. So that's my motivation for trying to emphasize that this is not insignificant.
Right, but in 10781, the proposed language that we have, D, playhouses exceeding 6 feet in height required, may be required in the required set or side yard or rear yard with if all of the following conditions are met. So maximum height not exceed 12. The maximum encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet. So if you do have a large playhouse, say it's 100 square feet, 50% of it can't be, or is it 50% or 50 square feet can't be in that side yard.
Right.
Yeah, I think with the absence of that language, if somebody's creating 250 square feet, right, is the threshold.
It's a total
for-
area of a playhouse shall not exceed 120
Well, I'm talking
square
about just the
feet.
general rule of when you need
It
to
is
get a
correct.
drainage
Yeah.
review.
Correct.
It's 250.
Mhm.
I mean, we already have that. So if they are coming in with a playhouse that exceeds 250 square feet, they're gonna have to do a drainage plan already.
Yeah, but
So it's just kind of belt and suspenders. I don't see the point of that.
well, then I was in the impression that it's, what if you did two 100 square foot at two different times? Does anybody see?
It's viewed differently, yeah. You could go piecemeal, but you have rules against how many accessory buildings you can have. You have a tree ordinance, you have drainage ordinance, I think trying to close the gap on, some crazy person who tries to beat the 250 by doing multiple different things at different times, I just don't think that's a significant practical concern.
And Dave feels the same way. So you all then are recommending that the playhouse definition
I'm fine
include
with
the
the first
first,
sentence,
the
yeah.
first sentence,
First sentence, you
but
wanna
delete
delete
the
the
second
second.
sentence.
Yeah,
So the first
my
sentence
concern is, I don't want the definition to preclude someone from using their yard in a way that they feel like they should be able to enjoy their property. I don't want the definition to nix people out from, building playhouses. But I do think that the first sentence, I like the way it's written. I like that.
Okay.
What about the playscape definition? Are there any questions or concerns about that one? Playscape.
For me, no, I like it. I like that it typically consists. I think that's nice.
This one is like, okay.
Okay.
So, do we have a motion to,
Okay, let me move that we adopt the definitions as proposed, with the exception that the second sentence of the playhouse be deleted.
okay, and the playscape definition remain the same?
Correct, the playscape is as shown.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Those opposed?
I said aye already.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
all right.
Okay, thank you.
Now I have another comment.
Okay,
On number 2 of 10781,
10781.
yeah, well,
Oh,
D,
okay, okay.
D2,
Yes,
it's a little scrambled here. 2 and 3 are sort of say the same thing. And number 3, the second part of that really ought to go up to number 2, such that it says that the maximum encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet in required side yard. Okay, so, and then the number 3, the total area of the playhouse shall not exceed 120 square feet in a required yard, period. You see?
okay, so you're.
Or could you just delete number 2?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so
And-
number 2
Yeah, those
is,
seem to just kind of do
yeah.
They
roughly
do.
the same thing.
Yes, it
unless I'm
says the
missing
same.
something.
All right, so the proposal is that 107.3 definitions, or I'm sorry, 107.81 definitions under D, number 2 be deleted.
Yeah, that does it.
Is there a second to that?
I second it.
Do you follow, Dave?
I need a second.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
He's right, it is redundant. It is.
Yeah, most part of the playhouse does not exceed 12 feet. Okay, maximum does not exceed 50 square. You're saying 1 and 2 are the same thing?
No, 2 and 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm looking. That's why I'm confused. Okay, total area of the playhouse. You know. No, that isn't the same. The total, I mean, the portion where it talks about the 50 square feet in the required side yard is the same as what's above. Encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet. Maybe measured at topmost. Encroachment area does not exceed 50 square.
We have our council weigh in, maybe?
Yeah,
There's a difference?
the total area of the playhouse shall not exceed. I'm sorry, I'm kind of caught off guard here. I need to think about this. I'm not ready to vote on that motion. What we've discussed earlier here for the definitions, I guess that vote is taken, right?
Yes, we already passed the definition of playhouse
We
and
did,
playscape.
okay, so this is a whole different thing. This is a change.
Correct.
Right, and we did not have that in front of us before, the idea of a change here, did we? This is
No,
new.
This is new on the fly, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But it does still meet the requirement of a regular agenda item, which is to
Okay.
regard, possible action on definitions of playhouse and playscape. And regulations.
Well, I don't know, is it on the agenda? Cause there's a
It's
section
not.
that says definitions, and that's what we just
Well,
talked about. This
definitions
is
and
regulation, not the
regulations.
Yeah.
this is a regulation
The-
of it, not a definition of it.
Yeah. It says definitions.
I don't even think we
So
can.
which one do you want to take out? Do you want to take
I
out?
don't think we can.
two?
Is this on the agenda? This is not on the agenda.
Okay.
We'd have to come back for this.
Well, let me get clear. Which one do we want to take out? Number 2 or number 3?
I think if you remove number 2, the second half of
It
number
is
3
okay.
already
Yes,
addresses
it is.
it.
I'm good with
Yeah,
that.
it does say
Yes,
regulation.
having studied
No, it
it a
does.
bit, I think that's right.
Yep, you're right.
Okay, so it has been determined by the powers.
I'm
that,
sorry.
The agenda item states discussion and possible action on definitions and regulations of playhouses and playscapes. So we are empowered to discuss D2 and take action. So
Okay.
the motion, Jerry's motion is to delete 2 under D, under 107-81. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Dave seconds it. Any further discussion?
Only discussion I would have is, do staff and council agree with our read of this? That it's redundant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure. I don't think that I read as being redundant. The way that I read it, which I guess is different than everybody else, perhaps. I'd say number 2 says the maximum encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet. So I think what number 2 does is actually limits the allowance under section 3 that the required rear yard can be 120 feet, because you can't do 120 square feet. You'd never get that far because you can't do more than 50 because of part 2. I think it would limit the required rear yard and required side yard to 50. So as much as 3 says, well, 120 here and 50 there, I think it's 50 overall, because 2 has already limited you. You couldn't go more than 50 in a required rear yard the way that I read it. I don't know.
Well, this is also only for playhouses exceeding 6 feet in height.
Right. But that's the way that I read it.
So the way I understand it is the playhouse in the rear yard cannot exceed 120 square feet, and it cannot exceed 50 square feet in a required side yard. So it limits the square footage both places.
Right,
Because
but on
they
number 2,
cannot be
it's
in the front yard.
right. On number 2, it says maximum encroachment area. Oh, I see. Encroaching into, but the required rear yard, I think the encroachment would still apply, right?
I think what this is actually
Yes,
doing is,
and that is a problem.
I think
I don't
it's-
think that's the intention here.
I think it's if you wanted to put it straddling the side
Straddling.
yard and the rear yard, kind of like, not in the full back corner, but kind of like right here. You don't want more than 50% or more than 50 square feet into the side yard. But most of it has to stay in the
Oh.
back.
I do
So if you're
remember
looking
that
at a square
discussion.
lot,
I do remember that discussion.
because you kind of want to push it off, and that's where that is defining that.
So it really is the maximum encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet
In
into
the required side yard,
yard,
because
into the
that,
required
that
side
is
yard.
what y'all
So
were saying,
that's-
that's what Jerry said at the very beginning, but then y'all made the
Okay.
motion on the other.
Is it the,
Yeah, that was Tony's recommendation. So so Jerry's recommendation was the maximum encroachment area does not exceed 50 square feet into the required side yard.
Yeah, originally, yeah.
That does make number 2 easier to understand. It makes it more important.
So, but the second half of 3 doesn't already say that?
Right, that needs to be deleted.
The total area shall not exceed 120 square feet and 50 feet. Yeah, that is. No, yeah, it is the same.
Yeah.
It is confusing, but
It's
I
6
I
of
agree
one,
with Tony, it's
6 of one, half dozen of another.
right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think back. It seems like we would have caught this before, or we had some reason for it. I mean,
So
So,
we could come
y'all's-
back to it and rewatch our meeting and see if we had some.
that's why I was
brilliant
going to do your
ideas.
movement. So when y'all were actually making the motion last time, this is word for word. Chair Dave Bench moved to amend the motion regarding playhouse placement, proposing that a playhouse be limited to a maximum area of 120 square feet within the required rear yard and 50 square feet within required side yard.
which is number 3.
Yeah,
And then accepted the amendment
yeah. I
and it
wonder if
carried.
2 was just in there and we forgot about it and did that.
That's what I'm thinking.
And again, this is only for a playhouse
Correct.
Correct.
exceeding 6 feet in height.
Right.
Yeah, I can't come up with a reason why we need 2 and 3.
I agree. And Jerry, you agree, right?
Right.
So do we have a motion to delete number 2?
There's already a motion on the floor for it.
Well, okay, we already have, okay, thank you. And there was a second. Dave seconded it, right? So, can we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you, Jerry, for this extra work you put in on this.
Yes, thank you.
All right, number 7, discussion and possible action on a recommendation for fence construction materials. I know originally this was Michael Rhodes' item. I did have a discussion with Brooke Brown about this. She was concerned, and she was going to look at this, or she thinks that state law might prohibit cities from restricting fence construction materials. She
No.
wasn't sure.
No.
You're saying no?
No.
I think it's just,
It's
you
just
can't restrict
building
the house,
material.
building material.
Yeah, building
So
material.
just the house, not the fence?
Buildings and commercial structures.
All
Buildings
right.
and commercials.
Okay, well, that was.
Building
Bruce.
mounted things too.
Oh, okay. All right, well, who would like to, take the lead on this discussion?
You cannot restrict building mounted things.
You can't prohibit things that are in the national code that allows things to happen. Yeah. But if you get off of the building, you're allowed to do.
So we can
your
do the fence.
Regulation.
All
yeah,
right, so-
freely.
So who would like to, take the lead on this?
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
First being that the reason why this is on the agenda is because of Mike Rhodes. You know, this is, I think, the 3rd month that we've carried this item. Also, that said, in the last city council meeting, I think it was the last city council meeting, there was a very short discussion about whether or not they need to rule on, city council does, whether they need to rule on what kind of materials a fence should be allowed to be made from. And I think Brooke said, well, I think P&Z is already looking at it, and I verified, I validated that. Yes, that's true. We're looking at it. So there is an expectation from City Council for us to come back with at least something. But without Mike here, you know, I don't know what that's supposed to be. So if someone has energy for this particular item, it might be a good idea for them to go away and like draw up a couple of different possibilities as to what the limitations might be. That's just a thought. You know, to me, fence ought to be able to be made out of anything. I don't have a dog in this.
Don't we already restrict no chain link, I believe?
Yeah, chain link is restricted. Other than that, I don't think there's anything.
No.
But what is this coming from? Like, why is this something that's on the radar?
I think some people are concerned about cinder block fences.
Yeah. It's cinder block walls that are not,
Yeah.
that are not plastered to make them look attractive.
It's kind of a
Yeah, I think the odds in our neighborhood of somebody doing that are pretty low, but
I think the house next door to Mike is like that. I think somebody.
unfinished.
Huh? They stuccoed it? Oh, all
Yeah, I
right.
think
Well, if
usually they
stuccoed it-
usually start as cinder block
Yeah.
and then they do, I mean, I don't know why
What-
anybody would want their fence to be cinder block, but.
Yeah.
But I
There-
think that's why he originally put this on there.
Okay. About 3 months ago, we were kicking this around here in P&Z, and I made the suggestion that in the code where we talk about detention walls, there's some language in there that says that the detention wall that is built needs to complement or be made of the same material as the house that's on that lot. And I thought that language isn't so bad that whatever fencing material or whatever would need to complement the space around it. And we didn't go any further than that. But maybe that's a starting point for if it were a cinder block wall, for instance.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest in doing a whole lot here, but I guess you could have a scenario where maybe somebody builds a cinder block wall fence and they stucco their side and say, well, what the hell, I'm not looking at the other side. And, we wouldn't want that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if it'd be as simple as, I can't think of any other materials. It seems like you don't want chain link and you don't want exposed cinder block, unfinished cinder block fences. I'm not sure if there's really anything else you need to cover.
I can't think of
I mean, steel is probably, is fine. A lot of people use
Wrought
steel.
iron is fine,
Wrought
yeah.
iron, wood,
We have wood, and we have
stone.
stone, right? So really, it
Board
is.
form concrete is, I think most people would say is fine.
Do we know if any other municipality nearby does this? Do they regulate what the fencing material is allowed to be? Or wall material or whatever? Do we know?
A majority of cities throughout Texas regulate fencing, and it's typically just for like chain link fence or barbed wire fences.
Barbed wire.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
cities like that try to keep a hill country look and feel. They'll require like openings within fences to allow wildlife to go through. So it really just depends on what you're, as a city, what you want to see. But you can regulate them, and a lot of cities do.
Could you point us to a city that you would recommend that we look at, maybe for some guidance, as a kind of a template?
Well, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's only a few, maybe, or a couple of fences that you'd like to deter people from building. I know in San Antonio, Olmos Park, they're a similar city like y'all's, and they also are very limited on what they regulate. So that might be a good one to look at. Of course, you can always look at Westlake Hills. I feel like they're very similar. So.
Well, then, I think what I'm going to, if I may, suggest that we table this thing and go away and maybe do a little homework on this, and come back with some ideas on what might be a good idea to make a recommendation to City Council with, or not.
I think that
And-
sounds fine. My gut is that maybe it's a little easier to do, to list what we don't want than to kind of go to the language, which is a good idea, Dave, go into language we already have, but then it's like, build it of a material and, if the house isn't built of steel, does that mean you can't have a steel fence? So I think it's more like, here's what you can't do. Because I think we have pretty good consensus on the few obvious ones that we
I
would
mean, it
want.
would be simple to just add, cinder block unfinished fences to the two that we
Mhm.
already prohibit too. If that was as simple as that.
Yeah, and barbed wire.
Yeah, barbed
Yeah.
wire, chain
Unfinished.
link, and unfinished cinder block.
Yeah, That's
Okay.
pretty much it,
That sounds pretty good.
yeah.
Well, I think cinder block or,
Concrete, I'm sorry, what?
well, CMU can be,
Masonry units, cinder block is not.
A word, okay, concrete masonry
yeah,
units.
CMU. I mean, I would add though that the CMU can be, stone face, stucco, several
Yeah.
things.
Unfinished, yeah, I think we
Unfinished.
we
Unfinished.
eliminate
Yeah.
unfinished.
And,
So I guess the term unfinished should maybe be defined.
or
Yeah.
or exposed,
Yeah.
exposed concrete, exposed.
So what if you
CMU.
just paint cinder block though then, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
that's a
that's
finishing,
the thing,
yeah.
then we get into, we have to say how we finish it, I guess.
Yeah, the painting, and it chips, paint doesn't stick to cinder block very well.
Pipe is so
I mean,
hard.
Yeah, maybe there's no CMU fences
There's
unless,
guys as CMU.
Yeah, it has to be.
yeah, so maybe it's no CMU unless the CMU is,
Plastic, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, maybe it's no CMU unless the CMU is finished with masonry of some kind.
I thought unfinished did a pretty good job. No
But
unfinished.
we were saying but couldn't paint be considered finishing? And we don't want painted cinder block.
Realistically, would you think that paint is finishing?
No, but somebody may.
It's the old story, I mean, if the neighbor complains about it, then maybe it isn't finished. Someone has to make a decision.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna try that trick.
Well, I think you just
Yeah,
say
the word finish
masonry.
seems arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean,
I could stain it too.
they think of elastomeric paint. That
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we define, what did you say, a concrete,
Masonry unit,
Masonry units.
concrete masonry unit, CMU, oh, okay. Must be finished with a with a masonry, face so that
So-
individual CMUs cannot be identified,
Some veneer
Yeah.
that disguises
the
the
CMU.
use of individual units.
Yeah, yeah.
I draw them, I don't write them.
But that makes, I think that sounds good to me. Does that sound good to you? Well, I mean, on the fly, should we table this and do?
I think we should look, I think those are good ideas, and then we should probably look at some other cities, because maybe we can just pull some language
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so there's a motion by Dave to table this and do a little bit of homework between now and our next meeting. Is there a second?
A second.
Second from Tony. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no, passes unanimously. Okay, all right, so I believe we are to the adjournment of the meeting. Any other questions or unfinished business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second it.
Michael Hall seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Well,
Thank you all. Thank you.
And thank you